The views and opinions expressed during Love and Life with Lana and Dave are those only of the speakers and guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or the position of our podcast hosts or affiliates. Any content provided is not intended to malign any religion, ethnic group, club, organization, company, individual, anyone, or anything. All right, let's do it.
You're listening to Love and Life with Lana and Dave, the podcast where logic is power and you take control. Thank you for tuning in and making the choice to listen in and get ideas for your own love and life. Now, here are your hosts, Lana Williams and David Vaccaro.
We know you've been waiting for part 2 of Reminiscing with Logic, social issues. So we're not going to make you wait one more second. So in the 50s and 60s, getting married wasn't really about love. It might have been for some people, but for the most part, it was, let's find somebody that you know is a good provider, would make a good father, has a specific family that they're being raised from, and you can say, okay, this guy's going to take care of me. And then you would marry that guy, and it would get you out from underneath your parents. And then you and that guy would, buy a house. He would work, you would have children, and this was like the deal. Now, if you happen to be in love with this guy or you happen to be attracted to this guy, it was like a bonus. But for the most part, it was an arrangement to some degree. You kind of had some choice in how you did it. But the gist was to be married by a certain time, and typically it was by the time you were in your early 20s, because that was like you were of marrying age at that point. And there was such a thing as an old maid, meaning if you went over 25 years old, you were like going to become a person who was too old to marry because of several things, right? But of course, youth and beauty and the ability to have children was extremely valuable in the 50s, right? So you got married you wanted to get married because that was what everybody wanted you to do. You didn't want to fall outside that category and not belong, right? And then stand out and have people talk about you. And that was really what would happen. You would marry somebody that was a good provider or came from a good family, or you knew had like gone off to join the military and then done a tour in the military. Maybe they were there 4 years or something. And they come back and they get this job. They know this job is guaranteed when they come back. Their father got them a job at the company he works for, and the father's been there 40 years. And this is the kind of thing that would happen. And then everything would be good, and you'd set up your house and everything would be great. And like the love part of it was an afterthought, or is this somebody I want to be with the rest of my life part was like something that you kind of hoped you would want, but you really didn't look at it as a priority when you were doing that. It was more like, if I have children, is this person going to be good to the children? Are they going to be able to afford these things that we're going to buy? Whatever. And then, like I said, the last factor almost was like whether or not you actually had attraction to the guy. If you weren't interested in the guy, then there was the whole have sex because he wants it thing. And sorry, but like that went on for a while. There was a plan in place. So you may not have wanted to have sex, but you knew you had to, because that was part of the deal of you marry this guy. He's going to expect that. You just kind of give him what he wants. This is kind of, like I said, this is that era. Of course, we would never do this now, but this is how it was. There might have been some sex, so there were children. But if the person was never interested in the guy in the first place and assumed there was a phrase back then called learn to love. Hey, if you weren't together long enough, you learn to love that person. And that was what you were told would happen. Mostly just to get you to sign on a dotted line and marry somebody and get you married before you decided, to do anything different. So all these factors were against you as far as making your own decisions and choosing something else. Everybody that you knew from the time you were a baby programmed you to be seeking a husband or wife at 18, 19, 20, and to be going through the motions of whatever it is that you were told you were supposed to do. And there were people that sat and talked to their parents, or their mother, mostly women who would talk to their mother about their honeymoon night and being told what they should do on their honeymoon night. That kind of stuff was a conversation that happened. Don't get me wrong. Mothers and daughters still talk. Fathers and sons still talk, but I doubt very much that they're getting instructions on anything because of the age that people are getting married now, if they get married at all. So, but when you had an 18-year-old daughter as a mother and you got her married off early, ooh, she's young. Wow, she could have gone to 25. We got her married at 18, so like that's a good thing. It was like you earned some years on that. You're gonna sit her down before she gets married or the day she gets married before her honeymoon and talk to her about what she's going to be, what her husband's going to be expecting from her that she's not prepared for, so that it's easier or that it gets done or whatever the case may be. And the kids that are born are usually born from the few times that sex happens because it was somebody told the person, hey, you've got to do this. He's going to want it from you. Just like get it over with. All that kind of stuff was stuff that was said. Anyway, again, if you watch enough movies from the 50s and 60s, you'll kind of see what I'm talking about. But it isn't like that now. So we're not dating people that we know or we've heard of or know people we know. It's not so much happening like that anymore. We need to go back to that though, because to be honest with you, it's it's turned into online dating and all that kind of stuff. And the consensus on online dating is that it was fine for about 5 minutes, but we're all over it. And it's just kind of more of an entertainment outlet at this point. There's not really a lot of quality coming from it. It's wasting time and, it's not, for whatever reason. There's a lot of reasons it's not working, but nobody has time to go through all of them. But yeah, so it doesn't, when you're dating now, you're dealing with people you've never met. You're talking to people you have never met in your life that know nobody that you know. And so the risk factor goes up. And yeah, the ability to, or the preference of trying to just shop for the next thing. It isn't working, but it's not surprising that it happens. I've got 14 people to choose from here. Don't get me wrong. Offline, it would be the same thing. I just think it's easier for somebody to sit and scroll through 14, 15, 20, 30 people online than it is to like sift through people in person. It's just because it's less time consuming and easier to look at everybody at a glance. That's fine. So I think that it's human nature that we're going to do that and capitalize on it because it's something that has been made convenient for us. Will everybody out there find somebody and just be with that one person? Will that ability to see 30 different people in a shot, will it really ruin relationships? I don't know. There are some people who are really never going to want to settle down, but I don't think that online dating is creating a situation where it's preventing them from doing it. I think those people are going to do what they're going to do. And I think this is an outlet and a way for people to find several people and make it a lot more as far as going through the motions and making sure that they can go through a lot of people in a very short amount of time. That's fine, but I don't really think it's going to prevent people who really want to settle down with one person. I don't think are going to decide against it if they find it. I think they're going to do it anyway, regardless of where they find the person. There are a lot of people that think that online dating is ruining like one-on-one relationships, and I don't agree. I think that people are who they are, no matter what's in front of them, and it may be interesting to look through a bunch of people. If you're a loyal person who isn't with anyone and you just want to go through ads and look at you're confused by what's happening on the line, or you're interested or curious and you want to see what it's like to go through profiles and look at people, there's no harm in that. I don't think it's going to make you a different person. I think when you find somebody that you really want to be with, you're going to stop and you're going to be with that one person because that's your personality trait. That's how you are. And someone else may not do the same thing because it's not who they are. So I think people who are looking for the bigger, better deal, that's basically kind of what the phrase is. People who are doing that are going to do that regardless. They're just using, this is an easier way to do it, but it's already something that they are doing. No matter where they find people, they're going to go through them like that in person or any other way. So that is that. But at the end of the day, to look back and say, there was a point in time, and I'm going to wrap this all up with what reminiscing for social issues means. There are definitely going to be different types of categories that I'm talking about, but social issues, basically, it means that there are times that change, right, that will cause us to do things differently. Technology changes, that causes us to do, things a little bit differently. Reminiscing and saying, man, it was so much better back in the 70s. I mean, again, it's going to fall back into that category of last week's episode where I say, how old were you when this particular music was playing? Was it when you were in your 18, 19, 20-year-old mindset? What you were listening to on the radio or on a cassette tape or wherever you're listening to, that's kind of the prime age for you to like cement your environment and look back and say, that's it. That was the really best time of my life. It hasn't been as good as that since then. It's not going to be. It wasn't before. It won't be again. That's it. That's the target. When I was 16, when I was 17, when I was 18, whatever it is, it's in that time frame that it's going to cement in your mind that this was the thing you did. This was the song you were listening to. This was the TV show you were watching. This was the movies you were watching. All of that went on in that particular era is going to resonate with you as like the good old days, the good times. That's going to be it, So when you look back, is it as good a time as you think it is? Or, are you remembering just the good points of that period of time? Was there a downside? Did you recall that there was a downside? If you did you decide it wasn't worth remembering? There may have been things that did happen back then that weren't so exciting or amusing, or they weren't good, but you just decided you weren't going to remember those things, and you kind of pick it and choose. And the good stuff, it's just very possible that those things may have faded over the years because you've put them aside and you've just said, okay, I'm just going to act like this didn't happen. Right? So looking back and reminiscing on things, just make sure that, you look back in the 50s and say, well, this particular thing was the best thing ever. And it's not like that anymore. And in the 70s, like, there's another thing I wanted to say. In the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, in each of those decades, there's somebody that was going, oh man, it was so much better in like 20 years ago. So in the 70s, several people were walking around ranting about how it was in the 50s, and it's gone downhill. As a matter of fact, if you watch Archie Bunker, the beginning song for Archie Bunker, All in the Family, basically, sorry, that's the character. All in the Family was the show. The very first opening song for that show is how horrible it is right now and how much better it was in the 50s, 40s, and 50s. That's the theme song for that show. And that show was in the 70s. And so, the beginning of that show is, hey, all these things were going on in the 40s and 50s, and it's all gone to crap. That's basically, so it's always been that we've always been complaining about some other time except for the time we were in. I just wanted to say that basically, to wrap it up, I wanted to say that as far as we're concerned with like reminiscing back about how something was the best or good or so much better than now, or, oh, the good old days, the good old days. The good old days are subjective, They may have been great for you. They may have sucked for you, but you just didn't want to remember them. You're remembering the parts that were good. I mean, there's absolutely no reason, there's no downside to doing that, and a lot of people do it. It's not accurate, right? It's not honest, but some people will do that. Well, I'm just going to remember somebody else's crap because mine was terrible. After 30, 40 years of that, you're going to think that that's how it was because you're going to have dumped that memory that wasn't good somewhere, and it's been decades since you saw it. So it's easy to convince yourself after a while that it was you that had the good time at that point. It wasn't bad, You could totally replace the memory that you have with something else if you don't like it. People do it all the time. So that's the thing that I wanted to bring up, and then there's like just that last thing as well, which is like technology, things that change, right? It's chronological, basically. But technology, how film has changed and TV has changed. I mean, I look back at all the TVs over the years that we've owned, and console TVs and little black and white TVs and, tube TVs and Panasonic TVs and then HD TVs and LCD TVs and all the different types of flat screens and, all the types of TVs that we owned over the years because of the change of technology. And you can hold on as tight as you want to a specific type of thing, but it always goes out of style. And at some point you have to go buy the new thing, the new version of the thing that you want to see or watch or whatever. And you have to go through this, oh God, I've fallen prey to this thing where I'm buying new technology. But it happens to everybody, right? Things used to be repairable. Nobody had to buy a new thing. Now it's almost cheaper to buy new than it is to repair. And that's by design that happened. You buy a brand new TV right now, and at some point it's going to be cheaper to buy another one than it is to fix the one you bought. That's just the way they're building things now. They don't want to repair things, repairing things tedious and too many parts, and it's not convenient for the marketplace. And it's too bad because there are people who really want to repair electronics and repair things, and it's kind of going out of style. It's very rare to find a person who's able to continue to live like that because products are changing so much that repair isn't required anymore for a lot of stuff. So, they used to make it once, make it to last, and then the parts were the thing that would sustain, right? So the parts would be the thing that would keep you coming back and spending money. And now it's nope, just buy the other, just buy the product again. That's the way it is. Vernacular and the way that we speak, that has changed, and that it continues to change. Believe it or not, I've lost track of the amount of stuff that's changed since I was, in my 20s and 30s. And now people are saying stuff now that I hate to sit around and listen to people talk and be like, I don't know what's happening, but that's starting to happen to me. And it's kind of sad, but it's there's a point in time where you just have to give up. You're just not going to keep up with the times anymore as far as stuff like that's concerned. And a lot of stuff that people are saying, as far as I'm concerned, it's completely contradictory to what they mean, And I'm not talking about passive aggressive stuff, which is another thing I don't like, but I mean, people are just using words that are not, that just don't mean what they're using. They're changing the meaning of words to mean something completely different or completely opposite the word. And it's very strange to me. But I think when I look back and I say, well, when I was a kid, what did I say that my parents or my grandparents didn't understand and thought I was crazy for using what words? I'm sure there were several. So I can't say that I didn't do the same when I was young. We all did. Also, I forgot to mention in the 80s, we had Stranger Danger. Stranger Danger in the 80s was all of a sudden, everything everybody was doing in the 70s had a consequence. And Stranger Danger in the 80s was a consequence of that. People went missing in the 70s, and we were sitting and looking at milk cartons when we were eating breakfast in the 80s. This kid's missing. Nothing like it is now. Amber alerts and everything like that. But back then, we didn't have that. We had the news every couple of hours or every few hours that we had a news report. And we had to somehow or other, people had to see somebody that was missing. So it was milk cartons and newspapers. That was how we found out. In the news, that was how we found out if somebody was missing, where they were or what was going on or anything like that. That was how somebody got the word out about things like that. Flyers up on poles. That would be another thing that we used. But it's different now, of course, with the Amber Alerts and stuff. Most people don't get that far. There's way too many people that are notified at one time for anybody to go very far without something happening. But years ago, people would just go missing and never come back. And there are people who are still missing from the 70s and 80s. Are they dead? Were they trafficked? They became a family. They just ended up living with some family at a young age and didn't know they were taken. I mean, that happens all the time. But when I was a kid, it was common. So, and music videos, that changed. Of course, I mentioned that from the last podcast, how music videos changed. It's weird to me that music videos just stopped happening. Music videos just went out of style and really never kind of came. You still see them online if you want to. But it's not like when when the music channels were on TV, that was the thing. We sat in front of those videos for hours and hours and hours. And I don't know, maybe we sat in front of them for too long and we just burned ourselves out on them. I'm not sure. But the music channels went away and it doesn't work like that anymore. And it doesn't have the same effect on the charts and on what songs are popular as they used to. So there was a point in time where if you didn't have a video on MTV or VH1 or CMT, or BET, like your song wasn't going to chart. It just wasn't going to happen. You had to have a video and it had to be put in rotation on one of those channels for anybody to care and for any radio station to play it and for it to get any popularity. It had to go through the video rotation. And if it didn't, it was going to be obscure. And that was just a point in time where that was a requirement. And then it's weird to me that it went away. But anyway, I think there was a point in time where 90s were a little bit, if you look at the 90s, it was actually, I think, a really good time. We had some really good music in the 90s, and we had some really good social awareness in the 90s. And then, I don't know what happened. The late 90s, it kind of had a really weird thing where I guess we were almost filling in the blanks at the end of the 90s. And some very strange music came out at the end of the 90s that I'll never forget. Like we had a boy band pop thing that went on that started in kind of 97, 98. And at the same time, we had like this neo metal stuff that was happening. So we had the Backstreet Boys and we had the 98 Degrees and we had NSYNC and we had even New Kids on the Block, although they were a little bit younger. They came back around in the late 90s, but it was that sort of thing. You had Britney Spears and you had Christina Aguilera and you had that sort of thing. It was very, very bubblegum. But then on the other hand, you had this Fred Durst neo-metal stuff. You had Linkin Park and you had Korn and you had that kind of stuff. So it was weird because those two, in my opinion, those two genres were just very strange to be happening at the same time, but that's the way it was. And I don't know if it's almost like they clashed in a way. I think it had a lot to do with MTV and the change in the programming in MTV and things like that. I actually believe that in a way, MTV and VH1 kind of created a backlash to all that pop stuff. And neo metal may have been like sort of a reaction to it, but it was very interesting. So you had Korn, you had Tool, you had, those kind of groups. Then you had like Alanis Morissette, and you had Meredith Brooks, and you had a lot of groups in the middle that were kind of coming out and playing, doing some one-hit wonders, and that was interesting. But you also had like this really weird, what I would call, might have happened a little early, but we actually had Gregorian chants going on there for a while, which is very strange. We had stuff like Enya, and we had stuff like Enigma. And they were very ethereal type sounding songs. And we also had like a weird throwback to like swing music. And that was strange. And it was like we had like bands like the Cherry Poppin' Daddies, and we had stuff like Brian Setzer, and we just had a couple of different bands that were like, it was interesting. It was kind of cool, those bands. But it was, again, it was sort of, it came out of nowhere and it sort of trended for a little while and then it sort of went away. And then we got into probably the mid 90s to the late 90s. We had a very heavy, heavy techno era. And I would say even into the early 2000s, I'd say up until about 2005, that was a big thing. It got to be, house is one thing, but techno is somewhere up above like 130, 132, 133 once you start getting up into that BPM, and that's the speed of the song. And we were getting up into 145 and 150 and songs like that. That went on for a while, and then that died out. So anyway, and then we did, in the mid 2000s, we dropped down, and then music dropped down so low that it was just like almost the like lowest BPM of hip hop that you can think of. Everything dropped, and it was just like that for a while. So you had stuff like Oh, I'm trying to think. The Yin Yang Twins, and you had, I want to say No Diggity, but I think No Diggity was a lot earlier than that, so that wouldn't have been right. But just very low 70s and 80s and 90s for speed, just really, really low for beats. Went on. Anyway, that's basically what I wanted to get into, is just like reminiscing back to, what is it that you think you remember? It's different from now, but so much is better now, but worse now. There are so many things that were better then, but also worse then. So to look at it like a very broad spectrum and understand that just saying, well, when we were young, children had both parents and family, there was family unit and it was all that kind of stuff. Well, yeah, but people that were married and not happy and wanted to get away from each other couldn't, because society wouldn't allow that, or society gave people a hard way to go when they tried to split up. Like divorce was this big thing that was extremely taboo and wasn't something the society wanted you to do. So getting divorced was like, you had a black mark on your record getting divorced, and there were a lot of women who would just be horrified by, I don't want to get divorced. I mean, that's the last thing I would do. Oh my goodness. But sure, the family unit was together, but like at what cost? There were a lot of families that had parents that were together and couldn't split up because of the societal pressure to stay together, but they hated each other. And so they fought all the time. And so the kids were sitting in the house listening to screaming and yelling and fighting all the time from two parents that, shouldn't have gotten married. They were too young to know what they wanted. And as they got older, they decided they didn't want that. But then now they've got two kids and a house and a bunch of stuff that they are now, under pressure to continue. And so a lot of them will try to keep up appearances by staying married and all that kind of stuff. But behind closed doors are screaming and yelling and throwing things. That's nothing, that's no better than a family that splits up. There are a lot of families that split up, and let's say there are 2 or 3 kids in the marriage that were, when the parents were together, when they split up, they may go to 2 separate houses, and the kids may not like the divorce, but in the end, if the parents are better off separated and apart, and the kids are in a better environment because of that, then that's a better deal. It's better for the kids to actually see 2 parents that are healthy and not at each other's throats than together and obviously not in a right place or not in a healthy, space, especially if it's bothering the kids. Now, obviously, you don't want to sacrifice the marriage for the kids or the kids for the marriage, but everybody should be happy with where they're at. And if the parents are miserable, the kids are miserable. And so, sometimes it isn't a good idea to stay together. Sometimes the marriage, keeping the marriage intact no matter what is really not the best way to go. If you have kids that wish their parents split up because they're just listening to fighting all the time and they can't, when kids are living in a house like that, they can't get their homework done. They can't concentrate. A lot of times they can't sleep. They're stressed. A lot of kids take the blame on themselves when their parents are doing stuff like that. And it's not fair to them because a lot of them turn it on themselves. I mean, no kid's ever going to try to decide between their parents. No kid should ever have to, right? So sometimes it is better for the parents to split up and amicably split up and tell the kids, hey, listen, we're both not going to continue doing this. We would rather have you guys be happy than, listening to us scream and yell at each other every day or every night or whatever. And yeah, it's going to be different for a while, but, you'll be happier, we'll be happier. We both love you. It has nothing to do with you. And again, it's in the long run going to be better for a kid not to deal with all of that craziness than to actually, it's going to be a better idea for them not to have to put up with being in the middle of fighting and listening to parents screaming. That's very, very traumatic for a kid, causing a lot of stress hormone, a lot of cortisol, a lot of epinephrine going on in the house, or, a lot of trauma for kids listening to that. So that's not right either. But, to look back and say, well, in the good old days, we this, we that. Now, there are some things I miss. I do miss like being outside and just playing. Like I grew up, I feel like I had, here's an example. I feel like I had the best childhood ever because when I grew up, we were always outside playing, riding bikes, playing basketball, playing baseball, hiking, exploring. Like we were always outside. However, the downside to that was our parents didn't want us in the house. So we can look back and say, well, this was the best time ever because we were out exploring. And don't get me wrong, we were in nature and we were having a good time. And so it was good what we were doing, but it wasn't always by choice that we were doing that stuff. A lot of times we were told, get out. It is the weekend or it's at night. You have 4 or 5 hours before dinner. Get out of here. I don't want you under my feet. We got told to leave. And if we wanted to come in home and sit in the house, unless we were sick, like we would have to be sick and verified as sick in order to sit in front of the TV all day. We were not allowed to do that. So I can look back at it and say, man, what a great childhood. All we did was ride bikes for miles and walk all over the place and build forts and we did all kinds of stuff outside, but we also weren't allowed to do anything else. So how do I remember it? Do I remember it as like, wow, what a great childhood? Or do I remember it as, we tried to do something different and they didn't allow it, so that's what we did? Who knows how it really happened, or is it how I see it? However, I do see the fact that like it seems like it's different now where kids aren't really outside anymore as much as they used to be. And that to some degree is unhealthy in the sense that women need, kids need vitamin D and kids should be out exploring nature and kids should, get out there, put their feet down in the dirt, and like it's good for them as a human being to just be in nature, in air and all that, right? Obviously kids that are, that have allergies and things like that, it's a different story, but basically children should kind of be out rough and tumbling and riding some bikes and having a good time, obviously safely they should be doing that. So I don't know, is it good for them to be in the house all the time either? If you ask those kids today, it's possible that they want to be in the house playing video games. Is it because their parents don't want them outside, or is it because they're choosing to stay inside? Sometimes when you're a kid, there's a confusion as to whether you want it or somebody wants it for you. You really can't distinguish the two. You can't tell whether you made a choice or you were told you had to. And when you look back on it, you're not going to remember which one it is. Again, back from the beginning of the podcast, we didn't know better than that. So when I was a kid, going outside and playing is what we did. It's just like what we did. We were told we were supposed to do it. We went out and we did it. We came in the house for lunch. We came back in the house for dinner. We did our homework. We got, we took our showers. We went to bed, whatever. We brushed our teeth. This is just like what we did. Our parents told us to do it and we did it. It was just like a routine for us. So I can't say that we had the choice or the thought process of, hey, what if I don't go out today and I just stay in the house? Hey, it's a nice day, get out. If you're Gen X, to this day, you cannot sit in the house when the sun's out. You feel like something's wrong with you. And I really believe that's because of our parents repeating over and over again, it's a nice day, it's nice out, go. If it's raining, it's one thing, but it's like nice out. It's like, that's the way I remember my childhood, but was, I don't know really what the source of that was. It became a habit for me to do that. And eventually I possibly thought, hey, that's what I want to do. Just remember when you reminisce that it's possible, that what you're remembering is something that you either took the really good parts of and decided not to remember the bad parts of, or something may have been really, really good for you, but not necessarily everybody else that was in your group, or you may have benefited by something that someone else did not have a good time with, or, you may have been in a habit to do something that you were just used to doing because you were told that was what you should do. And I refer to the bike riding and the young marriage and kids. That's stuff that society told you to do. You just got to be a certain age and you just did this because that's what people told you. And it's very easy to just kind of sleepwalk through the whole thing if everybody's telling you which way to go. But did you want any of those things, right? So just think that. When you're reminiscing back, just think about that. Like, just the viewpoint of how those things came about and why you did some of the things you did. And you might have enjoyed it. You might not have. You may have looked back at it as it was enjoyment. You may really have enjoyed it. Who knows? But I'm just saying. So that's adding some logic to reminiscing, and you're having a conversation with somebody else and you're saying, when I was a kid, we used to blah, 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 blah. But now when you catch yourself saying that, think about what you're reminiscing about. Think about what you were doing. Think about why you thought it was great. Right? Is it because it was when you were 18 and now you're 45 and so 18 was the best thing ever, and so everything you did at 18 was the best thing to do because of what age you were, because of your time in life? So, and I'm going to bring up the fact that I'm done. This is going to be part 2 for this. I'm done with this, and our website is www.lanaanddave.com. Hopefully you're getting to wear some hoodies and sit in front of some fire pits and drink some hot cocoa or some hot pumpkin spice something or other. Speaking of which, www.buymeacoffee.com/Lana and Dave. That's our place to go to buy us coffee. And we love coffee, so buy us a ton of coffee. We would be appreciative. Don't forget to download, subscribe on whatever podcast platform you listen to. Look us up, find us, subscribe, download our episodes, and give us 5 stars and give us a review. That would be a bonus. We're wrapping it up. We'll talk to you soon. Hey, you just listened to Love and Life with Lana and Dave. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please share the podcast, leave us a comment or review, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any new content. We'll see you soon.